Welcome to the Dream Novel channel. Before starting to listen to the fun in this clip, don't forget to like and comment, so that the admin will have the encouragement to continue making clips. Let's go listen. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 81, Hufflepuff's unconventional group activity. After dinner, everyone headed back to their common rooms. On the way, Cedric was still puzzling over the evening's events. Why was Professor Snape so angry, I wonder, he muttered, rubbing his chin. Could someone have broken into his storage room over the holidays? It was widely known at Hogwarts that Snape kept a private storage room stocked with extremely rare potion ingredients. Rumor had it that even the carpet was made of dragon skin, and that just blindly grabbing anything from the shelves could earn a small fortune in galleons at Diagon Alley. Judging by Snape's mood earlier, if his storage room really had been raided, he must have lost something significant. Don't overthink it, Kyle said, pulling out his wand and tapping a barrel near the common room door. Maybe he just got a Christmas gift he didn't like. Cedric gave him a sideways glance, eyebrows slightly raised. That miser, never satisfied with anything he gets. The passage opened, and they stepped into the Hufflepuff common room, which, despite being only a little past dinner, was already packed with people huddled over wooden tables, furiously working through their holiday assignments. Not only were the tables crowded, but the floor was practically covered with students, more arriving every few minutes. The entire room was overflowing, leaving barely any space to stand. Kyle blinked in surprise. Was this some kind of Hufflepuff group tradition? Wouldn't it be odd if he didn't join in? But he'd already finished his homework ages ago, and he couldn't very well redo it. Don't look so surprised, it was like this last year, too, Cedric said, patting Kyle's arm. Our prefect always tells us that holiday time is too precious to waste on homework. Cedric's prefect, ironically, was himself among the homework army, hunched over a desk in the corner, scribbling madly. He'd had a desk to himself earlier but had just relinquished it to a couple of desperate first years. Serves him right for being prefect, Kyle thought. If the common room was this packed, the library must be absolutely bursting. Carefully sidestepping scattered parchments and ink pots on the floor, Kyle made his way toward the dormitory entrance. Just as he was about to push open the door, Cedric's voice stopped him. Kyle! Cedric called, standing in front of the second-year dormitory door and looking at him from a distance. I really liked the Christmas present you gave me. Yours was pretty great too. Kyle replied, grinning. The two exchanged a long look before breaking into matching polite, standard-issue fake smiles. The first class after the holiday break was Professor McGonagall's Transfiguration. Unfortunately, Hufflepuff had already lost 20 points within the first 5 minutes. Clearly, their one pen, one light, one night, one miracle approach to last-minute homework had not paid off. Even Kyle had lost 2 points, thanks to lending his homework to Mikkel and Ryan, who'd copied it word for word, including his name. If you lend them your homework again, I'll deduct 20 points from you. Professor McGonagall glared at Kyle before returning to the podium. The holidays are over, so it's time to pull yourselves together, she said. Today we'll be learning how to turn a mouse into a snuff box. This is one of the most important skills you'll need this year, and I'll warn you now, it will definitely be on the final exam. Don't say I didn't tell you. The mention of finals made everyone sit up straighter. Students leaned in, taking detailed notes. Grades were everything at Hogwarts, and some, like Fred and George, were allowed a full, carefree summer so long as they managed 2 O's on their report cards. For students from Muggle families, grades were even more critical since their parents only understood traditional report cards. A poor performance would be hard to explain. After class, Professor McGonagall kept behind everyone who hadn't finished their homework, while the rest hurriedly left. They had homework to catch up on for other subjects, and time was tight. Kyle had wanted to go to the library before lunch, but when he arrived, it was packed. The common room wasn't any better, leaving him no choice but to settle in the Great Hall to wait for lunch. For lunch, Kyle chose pancakes and pork chops, a combination he rather liked, but he'd barely taken a couple of bites when Mikkel and Ryan appeared. "Kyle, about your charms homework." "No, no borrowing." Kyle took another bite of his pancakes and shot them a look. "I don't want to be lectured by Professor Flitwick too." "Come on, it won't happen again," Mikkel promised, raising a hand as if making an oath. "We were just really tired last night, but we'll revise it before handing it in today." Kyle was doubtful. Last night, he'd lent them all his assignments, but they'd only managed to copy his transfiguration homework. And when they'd come back to the dormitory, they'd been wide awake, playing wizard's chess with enthusiasm until Kyle eventually fell asleep. Given that, how could he trust them again? There was no way he was making the same mistake twice. Besides, there were less than 2 hours until Charms class, and even if they copied it, they'd only have time to change their names. Revising likely meant nothing more than that. After lunch, Mikkel and Ryan still wouldn't give up and continued to shadow him. Finally, Kyle spotted an opportunity and cast a disillusionment charm, slipping away unseen. Watching his friends wander off in search of him, Kyle felt immense gratitude for mastering the spell. Forget Avada Kedavra or Expelliarmus, invisibility was truly the ultimate charm. Once Mikkel and Ryan turned the corner, Kyle considered his options. The dormitory was a no-go, so he made his way to the Charms classroom instead. After all, he only needed somewhere quiet to read, and any empty space would do. Plus, unlike other places, the Charms classroom was guaranteed to be safe. When there wasn't a lesson scheduled, Mikkel and Ryan would never think to look there. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 82, The Dueling Master. A good professor needs to know what their students are thinking and how to keep them engaged. Professor McGonagall was particularly skilled at this. Just a mention of the final exam, and the students instantly forgot their holiday mindset, snapping back to focus on their studies. As her colleague, Professor Flitwick was equally perceptive. "Today, we will learn the softening charm," he announced from atop a stack of books, his voice high and cheerful. As the name suggests, this charm can instantly soften hard objects. It's very practical and widely used by adult wizards. For example, in Quidditch, which I know many of you love, the softening charm often cushions players who fall off their broomsticks. The students perked up at the mention of Quidditch. "You can also use it in duels," Professor Flitwick continued. "Softening the ground can throw your opponent off balance, giving you an opening to strike." With a twinkle in his eye, he added, "Back when I competed in dueling tournaments, I used this very charm to make my opponent surrender. And that year, I won the championship." The room buzzed with excitement. Quidditch and daring duels had captivated the students. "Professor, you won the dueling competition?" asked Katie Bell from Gryffindor, raising her hand. She looked doubtful. After all, Professor Flitwick was barely as tall as she was. "Oh, that was long ago," Professor Flitwick chuckled, "but yes, I won, and not just once. Anyone interested can read more in Dueling Champions of the 20th Century. It's in our library." "Wow!" murmured the students. They had never imagined that their gentle, unassuming charms professor was such a powerful duelist. "Professor, please teach us," one Gryffindor exclaimed eagerly. "Don't worry, I will," Professor Flitwick replied with a grin. "This is a practical charm, and it's often on the final exam, so pay close attention." "Yes, Professor Flitwick," came the enthusiastic reply. For the rest of the class, the students practiced with unprecedented focus, eager to master the softening charm under Professor Flitwick's watchful guidance. Each one seemed to envision themselves as the next dueling champion, squaring off against the stone in front of them as if it were a real opponent. By the end of the lesson, they reluctantly set down their stones and filed out of the classroom, still talking animatedly. Kyle, who hadn't rushed out like the others, lingered to ask Professor Flitwick some questions about a library book he'd been reading. "I read this book years ago, and it taught me a great deal," Professor Flitwick said, his fingers brushing the cover with a nostalgic smile. Then he carefully answered each of Kyle's questions. When Kyle finished, he closed the book and said, "Thank you, Professor Flitwick. That's all for now, I haven't gotten through the rest of it yet." "No rush," Professor Flitwick said warmly. "A good book is best enjoyed slowly. And if you have more questions, you're always welcome to visit me in my office on the 8th floor. Oh, and thank you for the Christmas gift. I haven't received a Rowan amulet with a dueling badge engraved on it in 30 years, it brought back many fond memories. I'm glad you liked it." With a final farewell, Kyle left the charms classroom. Little did he know, his two roommates were lurking around the corner, watching and waiting. "Mikkel, are you sure Kyle's coming this way?" Ryan whispered, peeking out cautiously. "It's been ages, maybe he's already left." "He'll come," Mikkel insisted. "Our next class is Defense Against the Dark Arts, and this is the only way to the 2nd floor. Trust me, he'll be here." "But..." Ryan started, only for Mikkel to cut him off. "Stop worrying. Just be patient if you want his help with homework." Ryan glanced nervously down the hall. Professor Flitwick just left, and he locked the door. In sudden panic, Mikkel bolted to the charms classroom, pulling the door open to find it completely empty. Michael's eyes widened. "What on earth?" He scratched his head. "This corridor is the only way to the 2nd floor. How did Kyle leave without us seeing him?" He glanced at the wall opposite and muttered, "Ryan, do you think Kyle can walk through walls?" The final class of the day was Defense Against the Dark Arts, and it didn't disappoint. Professor Oren, though still new to teaching, had quickly become one of the most popular instructors. On the first day back, he had brought a cage full of Cornish pixies to the classroom and encouraged the students to use any charm they'd learned to handle the mischievous creatures. With no restrictions on spells, the young Hufflepuffs couldn't contain their excitement. It felt like a friendly duel, and they eagerly took turns practicing their spells, relishing the chance to feel like master duelists. Although most of their spells went wide, under Professor Oren's watchful eye, the pixies couldn't cause any harm, even as they screeched and flailed in midair, furious at being contained. The pixies' helpless outrage only added to the laughter filling the room. To the students' delight, Professor Oren hadn't even checked their homework, making him a hero in their eyes. By the time the class ended, Hufflepuff students were practically singing his praises. After all, with more than half of them yet to complete their assignments, they just avoided losing valuable house points. On the contrary, Hufflepuff managed to earn at least 30 points simply from enthusiastic participation, leaving the students in high spirits. For Kyle, however, the point situation had lost some of its thrill. Despite the minor boost from Defense Against the Dark Arts, Hufflepuff still remained in an awkward position in the house rankings. They were solidly in 3rd, trailing Ravenclaw by nearly 100 points and holding a comfortable 100-point lead over Gryffindor in last place. Moving up seemed unlikely, and dropping down didn't seem probable either. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 83. Be careful when walking at night. Professor Oren hadn't just skipped marking the new students' assignments, he bypassed grading for all year levels. Overnight, this decision transformed him into Hogwarts' most beloved professor, hands down. He might actually break the curse and become the first Defense Against the Dark Arts professor to return next year, almost 50 years later. Jordan Lee, a well-known Quidditch enthusiast and second-year Gryffindor, declared openly in the Great Hall. If someone as brilliant as Professor Oren can't break the curse, then there's no hope for the course. Might as well cancel it. His sentiment was quickly echoed by both Hufflepuff and Gryffindor. But, naturally, where there's support, there's opposition. Just as Jordan Lee was voicing his opinions, a sudden burst of laughter erupted from the Ravenclaw table. "Tisk, are you really that thrilled just because you don't have to do homework?" A moderately handsome Ravenclaw student shot Jordan a disdainful look. "In my opinion, this decision is unbelievably irresponsible, a complete dereliction of duty. We've already discussed it, and we're going to file a complaint with Headmaster Dumbledore about it." "What did you say?" The Gryffindors turned to him with expressions darkening. After all, at Hogwarts, a professor who skips marking holiday homework is as rare as a troll performing ballet. Now that they'd finally encountered one, not only did these Ravenclaw nerds fail to appreciate him, they were even planning to report him. Unacceptable. Nearly growling, the Gryffindors stood, one of them calling out, "Want to repeat what you just said?" "I know who you are, Ravenclaw's Roger Davies," Jordan said, hands in his pockets, looking down his nose at the other boy. "You're the one who mocked us in Charms class a while back. You're pretty bold. Better watch yourself walking around at night." Seeing their own housemate being threatened so blatantly, the Ravenclaws couldn't stay silent. "Roger, don't be intimidated," said a senior student with a prefect badge on his chest, stepping forward and sneering at Jordan. "Gryffindor, you trying to pick a fight?" "Oh, prefect, you shouldn't say that," Fred chimed in, waggling a finger. "My friend here was just concerned that your first years might trip and fall." "How did that turn into wanting a fight?" "Oh, I get it," George added, grinning. "You're going to tell Professor McGonagall we tried to start a fight, hoping she'll dock our house points, right?" Fred raised an eyebrow. "And that way, you'll edge closer to winning the House Cup. And no one will stop you from reporting Professor Oren either," Jordan said, picking up where they left off. "As expected from Ravenclaw, always full of clever schemes," he added, voice dripping with mock admiration. Hearing the three of them carry on in unison, the prefect's face turned green. The House Cup. As if the Gryffindors had any standing to brag about with their dismal two-digit house points. "We're not going to the professors," the Ravenclaw prefect said, exhaling deeply. "What I mean is, the path to Hogwarts is smooth enough, Roger won't trip. But if anyone were to try something malicious, we won't sit idly by." His words rallied the Ravenclaws. "Yeah, we're not afraid of Gryffindor. Come on, who's going to tell the professors who is the true Krupp here?" "Roger, don't worry. With head boy Edward here, they won't be able to do anything." With his housemates backing him, Roger Davies felt a surge of confidence, holding Jordan Lee's gaze without flinching. The tension between the two groups thickened by the second. "Kyle, what do you think?" Cedric asked, looking a bit concerned from the Hufflepuff table. "Do you think they'll actually end up fighting?" Kyle, unbothered, took a hearty bite of steak and shrugged. "Nah, it's just talk. As long as they're not completely out of their minds, they're not going to fight." It was a classic Hogwarts scene. Gryffindor and Slytherin bickered daily, yet they rarely actually came to blows. Besides, Ravenclaw wasn't about to jeopardize its standing as the second best house, and Gryffindor wasn't going to let Slytherin profit from a needless fight. Trash talking was probably as far as this would go. As for anything more underhanded, like plotting against each other, Kyle thought it unlikely. Unless someone wanted detention, neither side would risk doing something so brazenly obvious. The entire castle knew about the tension between the two houses. Anything too blatant would have them caught in no time. Of course, this logic held true for Ravenclaw. If it had been Slytherin in the mix, that might have been a different story. What is going on here? Professor McGonagall suddenly swept into the hall, lips pursed as she scanned the group at the center of the commotion, her gaze sharp. "I do hope none of you are fighting, gentlemen. Because if you are..." "Of course not, Professor McGonagall," Fred quickly answered, stepping forward with a perfectly innocent look. "We were just having a friendly discussion about Quidditch." "Yes," George added, nodding eagerly. "We were all just saying what a shame it was that Ireland lost to Canada this year." Jordan Lee, who'd been slower on the uptake, caught on only after George gave him a swift kick. "Right. But Ireland will definitely win the championship in 4 years." Roger Davies snorted, apparently unable to resist, and shot back, "That's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. Everyone knows the Bulgarian team is the strongest. Ireland can't even hold a candle to them." "Oh, and what exactly did your Bulgarian team achieve this year?" Fred retorted, raising an eyebrow. With a grin, George chimed in with a mocking tone, "Fred, have you forgotten? They didn't even make it to the semi-finals." Roger's neck craned, his voice rising as he defended his team. "That's only because their seeker is weak. If they'd just replace him, Bulgaria would easily be the best team in the world." Kyle couldn't help but smirk slightly, noticing that Roger seemed even more worked up now than before. The whole standoff fizzled out in an oddly amusing way. Professor McGonagall, satisfied that no rules had actually been broken, simply gave them a stern reminder not to cause a ruckus in the Great Hall. Then, with a brief glance in Kyle's direction, she added, "Mr. Chopper, Dumbledore would like to see you. If you're finished eating, could you please head to the headmaster's office?" "Yes, Professor McGonagall." Kyle swallowed the last bite of his steak and followed her out. Just as they stepped into the corridor, he heard her mutter under her breath, "Honestly, everyone knows Scotland is the strongest team." Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 84, Dumbledore's Wool Socks. Professor McGonagall left Kyle at the 8th floor entrance, right by the dripping stone gargoyle, and helped him with the password before departing. Sherbet Lemon. The headmaster's office looked exactly as Kyle remembered. Fawkes lay peacefully on his perch, and upon seeing Kyle, he raised his head slightly, as if in a casual greeting. Kyle took out a handful of Dittany leaves, a small gift, and placed them near Fawkes's shelf. Dumbledore, unlike last time, was present, sitting in his chair, smiling warmly, with a familiar bottle set on the table in front of him. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," Dumbledore said, rising from his chair and handing Kyle the bottle of magic-suppressing potion on the table. "You know, just like last time." "Of course, Headmaster," Kyle nodded, taking the bottle. "I'll deliver it to Mikkel right away." "Well, there's no rush. If you're not busy, would you like to keep an old man company for a chat?" Seeing Kyle hesitate, Dumbledore added, "Don't be nervous, just a casual chat, like when you were at Newt's place." "I'm just a little surprised," Kyle admitted, scratching his head. "But, Headmaster, I only have Dittany leaves on me. I really don't have anything else." "Fawkes has a forgiving nature, he won't stay angry forever." Dumbledore's face froze momentarily, but he quickly returned to his usual self. "I received your Christmas gift," he said, gesturing for a fresh glass of lemonade to appear for Kyle. "I finished reading it that very day, and I've reread it many times since. It's truly fascinating." At first, Kyle thought Dumbledore was simply being polite, but the next moment he realized he'd been mistaken. Dumbledore reached into a drawer and took out not one, but 2 pairs of woolen socks. One pair was red with gold trim, while the other was a smaller, blue-pink pair. Both were embroidered with a large letter A. Surprised, Kyle looked up and asked without thinking, "Did you knit these?" "Yes," Dumbledore replied, clearly pleased. "I'm actually rather good at knitting socks." Managed to get it right on the first try. Kyle opened his mouth to reply but found himself at a loss for words. What was going on in the wizarding world? The supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, Grand Sorcerer and First-Class Order of Merlin, Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot, and the world's most powerful white wizard, Dumbledore, proudly showing off his hand-knit socks. Judging by the delighted expression on Dumbledore's face, he was genuinely proud of his handiwork. "You knit very well, Headmaster," Kyle managed to say. "Thank you." Dumbledore put away the 2 pairs of woolen socks and then, with a sudden sigh, said, "I think the one regret I have this year is that I didn't get you a Christmas present. It's truly disappointing." Kyle waved his hands quickly, wanting to assure Dumbledore he'd never expected a gift. But then again, as the model student he was, Kyle didn't want Dumbledore to be weighed down by guilt. Seeing an elderly wizard, especially one as revered as Dumbledore, tormented by a feeling of guilt was more than Kyle's heart could bear. "Why don't I just ask for a gift myself?" Kyle thought, running his hand along his chin. It felt a bit shameless, but he didn't mind suffering a little embarrassment for the headmaster's sake. His eyes drifted around the office and landed on a dusty mirror in the corner, something that didn't look valuable. Or perhaps the rough stone basin beside it would work just as well. It was just a decoration anyway, so choosing something cheap and replaceable seemed perfect. "I'm really being considerate," he thought. Kyle made no effort to hide his appraisal. Nearby, Dumbledore seemed to pick up on his thoughts, his mouth twitching slightly. Just then, Kyle turned to him. "Headmaster, perhaps you could give you a glass of lemonade?" "Certainly," Dumbledore said, tapping the table to summon another glass. "No, I meant maybe today. Today is indeed a beautiful day." "Beautiful day." Kyle glanced at the window, noting that it had been snowing all day and hadn't stopped yet. Before he could respond, Dumbledore looked outside as well and remarked, almost wistfully, "I hadn't realized it was already so late." Kyle understood. Though he regretted he couldn't ease Dumbledore's concerns, he replied, "I'll be on my way then. Mikkel is waiting for his potion. Would you like to take some snacks with you?" Dumbledore opened a drawer, revealing a collection of sweets and candied fruits. Kyle was about to decline, but then noticed the candies were all high-end, including many types he'd never even seen before. "I thank you on behalf of Mikkel." By the time Kyle left the headmaster's office, his pockets were stuffed with sweets. The heavy oak door closed behind him. Inside, Snape appeared from the shadows, eyeing the spot where Kyle had been sitting, his gaze narrowing thoughtfully. "I'm curious, Severus," Dumbledore remarked, closing the drawer and adding a small golden lock. "You specifically asked me to call Kyle here, yet you remained hidden." "You dismissed him too early," Snape replied flatly. "By our agreement, he should have stayed for at least 30 minutes. Students have things of their own to attend to," Dumbledore said, taking a sip of his tea. "Severus, we can't monopolize their time." "Oh. Is that your view?" Snape glanced at the mirror of Ariste in the corner before making his way toward the door. "Severus," Dumbledore called out, "I think you may have a bias against Kyle." Snape halted and turned back. "What are you implying?" "Kyle is a very thoughtful young man," Dumbledore said evenly. "As I understand it, he gave gifts to every professor on Christmas, even extending a packet of dried fish to Mrs. Norris, who is not particularly popular." "Oh," Snape drawled, narrowing his eyes. "And what is your point?" "I think it's possible he simply overlooked his potions professor for the moment," Dumbledore replied, a small smile playing on his lips. "Even I, on occasion, make such simple oversights. It's perfectly normal. You shouldn't hold it against him." "Perhaps he didn't forget," Snape retorted, before flinging the door open and leaving without looking back. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 85, Begin slacking this time. Administering the medicine went surprisingly smoothly. Mikkel took the potion bottle labeled with the correct number and drank it all at once without needing any prompting. From his gradually contorted expression, it was obvious that the potion's taste remained indescribably awful, yet Mikkel didn't let a single drop go to waste. Even after he finished, he smacked his lips a bit and sighed, "Good medicine." Of course, it would have been more convincing if his expression had been a little less strained. As it was, his face looked almost bruised, his features scrunched together. Paired with his earlier comment, "Good medicine," anyone unfamiliar with him might have mistaken him for some kind of poison tester. Kyle struggled to understand what was going through Michael's mind at that moment. Perhaps it was a blend of both pain and satisfaction. As the weather warmed, the Quidditch season was already halfway through. Gryffindor held the lead with the most wins and points, closely followed by Hufflepuff. Slytherin, however, lagged far behind in third place. Ever since they were showered with dung bombs in the last game, just the sight of a broomstick seemed to make them dry heave. But after the Christmas break, they gradually recovered and had been scoring points like mad in recent matches, fighting to close the gap with the top two. Being Slytherin, though, they weren't about to avoid underhanded tactics in their quest for victory. In a recent game, they even knocked Gryffindor chaser Angelina off her broom. "This isn't over, Rosier," Charlie growled as he escorted Angelina off the field. "We'll see about this." Rosier merely shot Charlie a mocking look, as if entirely unfazed. That evening, during dinner, more than 20 broomstick-shaped packages were dropped by owls onto the Slytherin table. Rosier's face turned a vivid shade of green on the spot. Gryffindor students, led by Fred and George, loudly urged him to open the packages and enjoy the surprise they'd prepared. The commotion quickly drew Professor Snape's attention. Cloak billowing, he stormed over after learning the details from a Slytherin informant. "What dumb bomb?" "I have no idea what you're talking about, Professor," Charlie said innocently. "They're just fireworks we had specially made to congratulate the Slytherin team on their well-deserved victory in today's match." "Just fireworks?" Snape's tone was skeptical. "Absolutely. Rosier is a worthy opponent. He won fair and square, so of course, we wanted to congratulate him," Charlie grinned. "What, doesn't Rosier like the gift?" With his graduation approaching and plans to head off to Romania, Charlie was notably less anxious in the face of Snape than most students. Snape's expression darkened, and he drew his wand, flicking it to open the packages in front of everyone. Sure enough, the packages contained nothing but fireworks. Once unwrapped, the golden-red fireworks shot toward the ceiling, where they exploded with a loud bang, spelling out the word "victory" in blazing letters. Despite finding no dumb bombs, Snape docked Gryffindor 10 points, for creating a disturbance in the Great Hall and for disrespecting a professor. But Gryffindor took it in stride. With their house points reduced to single digits, they'd all but given up on winning the House Cup that year. They figured they'd need at least 500 points at the term's end to stand a chance, so they collectively decided, might as well party. After all, if they were destined to lose, why not enjoy it? The Gryffindors were starting to see Hogwarts life in a new light, one filled with unexpected freedom and fun. Even Snape's 10-point deduction, which was patently unfair, didn't faze them in the slightest. George, putting on an exaggeratedly earnest expression, even suggested, "I think disrespecting a professor is a pretty grave offense. You should really take 30 points from us, Professor." His reasoning was simple: if they couldn't be at the top, they might as well aim for rock bottom. Snape's expression grew even darker. He genuinely wanted to fulfill George's request, but unfortunately, the Gryffindor hourglass held only a thin layer of sand, probably no more than 20 points. He couldn't just drain them all. Professor McGonagall's authority still needed to be respected. Besides, the potion ingredients list required the deputy headmistress's signature, and he had to consider his own private stockroom too. "You're right, Mr. Weasley," Snape said, giving George a sinister look. "But there's no need to deduct points, a detention will do." He paused, letting the silence settle before continuing. "Tonight, you'll report to the potions classroom and clean all the old cauldrons by hand. No wands allowed. Filch will supervise to ensure you don't miss a spot." George's grin froze. He stood there in a daze even after Snape had left the Great Hall. By Merlin's floral socks. Detention? For what? "Because he's a professor," Fred said, patting George's shoulder with exaggerated sympathy. "Look on the bright side, the night will pass quickly." "You'll help me, right?" George asked hopefully. Fred fell silent, clearly reluctant. "Percy? Charlie?" No one answered him. At the prospect of detention, a brotherhood built over more than a decade suddenly seemed rather flimsy. George felt close to tears, as though the world had turned cold and gray. Ahem. Just as George was perfecting his tragic expression, Charlie gave him a disgruntled tap on the head. "Oh, knock it off with the dramatics. Don't think I don't know you and Fred have a self-cleaning kit tucked away somewhere." The tears about to fall vanished instantly as George's familiar grin returned, any trace of sorrow or frustration gone. "You're no fun, Charlie." As the two most frequent recipients of detentions, Fred and George had come prepared. The self-cleaning kit was a reliable tool they devised specifically to deal with scrubbing duties, especially for cauldrons. "But really," said Charlie, looking at some torn packaging left behind, "that trick of yours was brilliant. I didn't expect Rosier to get so freaked out he'd drop his plate." "What was that about?" "That's a secret," George and Fred chimed in unison, sharing a mischievous wink. Luckily, Charlie wasn't the curious type. Satisfied with knowing that this strategy could rattle Slytherins, he didn't press for details. Now the fun in this clip is over. Which listeners haven't liked and commented yet? You can press like and comment to encourage the admin find the fun in the next clip. May the listeners be happy forever.